I am sitting in my small apartment in Portland staring at my phone as it buzzes with an unknown Colorado area code. 5 years. 5 years of silence, and now they want to talk. The irony is not lost on me that they are calling during what should have been a peaceful Friday evening with my boyfriend Jake. But peace was never something my family understood when it came to me. You see, for 18 years I lived in a house where I was treated like a punching bag by my older brother, while my parents turned a blind eye. And now, after all this time, they need something from me. But let me tell you how we got here. Before I dive into this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop a comment below and hit that like button if you have ever felt invisible in your own family. And trust me, you will want to stick around to see how karma finally caught up with the people who were supposed to protect me. Growing up, our family looked picture perfect from the outside. I am Faith, and when I was 8 years old, we lived in a beautiful 2-story house in Colorado with a lovely backyard where my parents hosted barbecues every weekend. My father, Derek, worked as a manager at an insurance company, and my mother, Linda, was a nurse at the local hospital. We went to church every Sunday, had family photos displayed on the mantle, and to anyone looking in, we seemed like the ideal American family. My older brother, Marcus, was 4 years older than me, and he was everything my parents wanted in a son. But behind closed doors, Marcus had turned our home into my personal hell. It started when I was 8 years old with what he called games. He invented his own twisted version of Simon Says, where instead of innocent commands, he would make me do things that hurt. He would push me down to the ground hard enough to leave bruises wrap his hands around my throat, while calling it playing, or force me to eat dirt from our mother's potted plants in the living room. Marcus was incredibly smart about his timing. He only did these things when our parents were not home, which was often since they both worked demanding jobs. At first, I genuinely thought this was normal sibling behavior. I had no frame of reference for what healthy relationships looked like. When Marcus would force me to drink soapy water from the kitchen sink, telling me it was a magic potion that would make me disappear, I believed him. When he would pin me down and press his weight on my chest until I could not breathe, then release me. Just before I passed out, I thought all big brothers did this to their little sisters. But by the time I turned 9, something inside me knew this was wrong. I remember the first time I tried to tell my mother about what Marcus was doing to me. I had fresh bruises on my arms from where he had twisted my skin until it turned purple and black. When I showed her, she barely glanced at the marks before dismissing my concerns with a wave of her hand. "Honey boys will be boys. He is just playing rough," she said while continuing to fold laundry. "You need to learn to be tougher." I tried again with my father that same week. I waited until he came home from work and was settled in his favorite recliner with his evening beer. "Dad," I said quietly, "Marcus hurts me when you and Mom are not here." My father looked at me with a mixture of annoyance and disbelief. "Marcus is just being a big brother sweetheart. You need to toughen up. Boys play differently than girls." Then he turned his attention back to the television, effectively ending our conversation. That was the moment I first felt truly alone in the world. The people who were supposed to protect me, who were supposed to believe me, had essentially told me that my pain did not matter. I began to wonder if maybe I was being too sensitive, if maybe this really was normal and I was just weak. Marcus, somehow sensing that our parents would never take my side, began to escalate his behavior. He realized he had complete immunity to hurt me however he wanted. One afternoon when I was 10, he locked me in our dark basement for over 2 hours while our parents were at work. The basement was cold and damp, filled with shadows that seemed to move in the corners. I pounded on the door until my fists were raw, screaming for him to let me out, but he just laughed from the other side. When he finally opened the door, he warned me that if I told our parents, next time would be worse. Another time, he forced me to eat the dog food from our golden retriever's bowl standing over me and threatening to hurt our dog if I did not comply. The dry kibble scratched my throat going down, and I gagged and retched, but Marcus just smiled with satisfaction. When our parents came home and found me crying, Marcus told them I had been playing with the dog and accidentally got dog food in my mouth. They believed him without question. By the time I turned 10, I finally understood that this was not playing. This was deliberate cruelty, and somehow I was completely alone in recognizing it. As I entered middle school and Marcus started high school, the dynamic in our household became even more twisted. Marcus was excelling in every area of his life. He made the varsity football team as a freshman, maintained straight A grades, and had become the golden child our parents had always dreamed of. Meanwhile, I was becoming increasingly withdrawn, and my academic performance was suffering. The stark contrast between us only made our parents love Marcus more and view me as the problem child. "Why cannot you be more like your brother?" became a constant refrain in our house. When Marcus brought home another perfect report card, our parents would beam with pride and take him out for celebration dinners. When I brought home B's and C's, they would lecture me about applying myself and reaching my potential. They could not see that my declining grades were a direct result of the psychological torture I was enduring at home. Marcus seemed to feed off their praise and my suffering. During this period, he developed new ways to torment me that were even more creative and cruel. One night when I was 11, I woke up to find him standing over my bed with scissors. Before I could react, he had cut off most of my hair while I slept. I woke up the next morning looking like someone had taken a weed whacker to my head. When our parents saw what had happened, instead of being horrified, they laughed. "Boys and their pranks," my mother said while trying to fix the damage with more cutting. "Marcus, you really got your sister good this time." The psychological torture was often worse than the physical abuse. Marcus would force me to eat food that had been sitting out for days until it was moldy and spoiled. When I would vomit from the rotten food, he would accuse me of being dramatic and making a mess for attention. He started using me as a literal punching bag when he wanted to practice his boxing techniques for football training. He would make me stand still while he threw punches at my stomach and ribs, always careful to hit places where bruises would not show when I wore regular clothes. But perhaps the cruelest thing Marcus did during this time was destroy my sense of self-worth with his words. He would tell me almost daily that our parents would never love me the way they loved him. "You are just the mistake they had to keep," he would whisper in my ear when we passed each other in the hallway. "They only pretend to care about you because they have to, but we all know you are worthless." These words cut deeper than any physical pain he inflicted. At 12 years old, I began to believe that maybe he was right. Maybe I was worthless. Maybe I was just a burden on my family. I started cutting my arms with my father's razor blades, finding that the physical pain actually provided relief from the emotional anguish I was carrying. When Marcus discovered my cutting, instead of being concerned, he saw it as ammunition. "See," he said when he caught me cleaning blood from shallow cuts on my forearm, "you are crazy. Even you know you do not deserve to be alive. Who would ever believe anything a crazy person says?" He threatened to tell our parents about my self-harm not out of concern for my well-being, but to further discredit anything I might say about him. High school brought new levels of hell that I did not think were possible. Marcus was now 18 and in college, but he came home every weekend, and those weekends became my worst nightmare. He had started bringing friends from college home with him, and he began using me as entertainment for his buddies. He would force me to do humiliating things in front of them while they laughed and cheered him on. I remember one particularly traumatic weekend when I was 14. It was January, and snow was falling heavily outside. Marcus and 3 of his college friends were home for the weekend drinking beer in our basement while our parents were at work. Marcus called me downstairs and ordered me to put on my summer bathing suit. When I refused, he grabbed me by the hair and dragged me to my room, throwing the bikini at me and threatening to hurt me worse if I did not comply. Wearing nothing but a thin bathing suit in the middle of winter, Marcus and his friends took turns dumping buckets of ice water on me while I shivered uncontrollably. They thought it was hilarious. They took photos and videos on their phones, and Marcus told me he would post them online if I ever tried to tell anyone what really happened in our house. I stood there for what felt like hours, soaking wet and freezing while they laughed at my misery. Another weekend, Marcus locked me in the hallway closet for an entire night. The closet was tiny, barely big enough for me to sit down and completely dark. I could hear them playing music and having fun just outside, but I was trapped in that suffocating space for 8 hours. By morning, I had lost all feeling in my legs and could barely walk when Marcus finally let me out. The threats escalated too. Marcus began threatening to throw me out of our second-story bedroom window. He would force the window open during winter and make me lean out while he held my ankles, telling me that one day he might just decide to let go. The psychological impact of these threats was devastating. I lived in constant fear, never knowing when Marcus would decide to escalate from threats to action. During my sophomore year, I became so desperate that I tried reaching out to my school counselor, Mrs. Patterson. I thought surely an adult outside my family would listen to me and help me. I told her about the abuse, about the physical violence, about the psychological torture. She listened with what seemed like genuine concern, and for a brief moment I felt hope that finally someone was going to help me. But Mrs. Patterson's response crushed that hope completely. Instead of involving Child Protective Services or law enforcement, she called my parents. She told them that I had been making concerning statements about my home life and suggested family counseling. When I got home that day, both my parents were waiting for me with expressions of fury I had never seen before. "How dare you embarrass our family like this?" my mother hissed at me. "Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to get that phone call at work?" My father was equally angry. "Marcus is going to Harvard next year on a full scholarship. Stop trying to ruin his future with your lies and jealousy." That was the moment I realized that even trained professionals would not believe me if my own parents were determined to protect Marcus's reputation. The isolation became complete after that incident. Marcus made sure to sabotage any friendships I tried to form at school. He would somehow find out who I was talking to and would spread rumors or create situations that drove people away from me. I became known as the weird girl with family problems, and eventually I stopped trying to connect with anyone. By the time I was 16, the combination of years of abuse and complete isolation had pushed me to my breaking point. I seriously considered suicide, spending hours researching different methods and writing goodbye letters that I never sent. I felt like everyone would be happier if I just disappeared, just like Marcus had always told me they would be. The final straw came on my 17th birthday, an event that should have been a celebration, but instead became the most traumatic experience of my entire childhood. My parents had planned a small family party, nothing elaborate, just dinner and cake at home. Marcus had driven down from Harvard for the weekend, bringing his new girlfriend, Ashley, with him. Ashley was everything I was not: confident, beautiful, popular, and completely charmed by Marcus's public persona. During dinner, while my parents were in the kitchen preparing the birthday cake, Marcus and Ashley decided it would be funny to play what they called a birthday prank on me. Marcus grabbed a bottle of my father's whiskey from the liquor cabinet and mixed it with dish detergent from under the kitchen sink, creating a toxic concoction that burned my nose just from the smell. "Drink this," Marcus commanded, shoving the glass toward me. "It is a special birthday cocktail we made just for you." When I refused and tried to push the glass away, Marcus's expression turned dark and dangerous. He walked over to the corner of the living room where my pet hamster Peanut lived in a small cage. Peanut was the only living thing in that house that brought me any joy or comfort. "You see this little rat," Marcus said, opening the cage and grabbing Peanut in his fist. "If you do not drink every drop of what we made you, I am going to squeeze until he pops." Ashley giggled at this threat like it was the funniest thing she had ever heard. Marcus tightened his grip slightly and I could see Peanut struggling to breathe. Without any other choice, I took the glass and drank the entire contents. The alcohol burned going down, but the detergent was worse. It felt like liquid fire coating my throat and stomach. Within minutes, I was violently ill, vomiting until there was nothing left in my stomach and then continuing to retch painfully. The chemical taste would not leave my mouth, and I could feel my throat swelling shut. My parents found me collapsed on the bathroom floor, barely conscious and struggling to breathe. They rushed me to the emergency room where doctors had to pump my stomach and monitor me for chemical poisoning. When the doctor asked what had happened, my mother did not hesitate to throw me under the bus once again. Faith has been experimenting with drinking lately, she told the doctor with a perfectly straight face. We had no idea she had gotten this bad. We feel terrible that we did not notice the signs sooner. My father nodded along, adding, "We will definitely keep a closer eye on her drinking problem." Marcus played his part perfectly, standing by my hospital bed with tears in his eyes, telling anyone who would listen how worried he was about his little sister's alcohol abuse. "I just do not understand how this happened," he said to the nurse. "She has always been such a good kid. I hope she can get the help she needs." Lying in that hospital bed, listening to my family rewrite the narrative of what had happened to paint me as a troubled teenager with substance abuse issues, I finally understood with crystal clarity that they would never protect me. They would rather sacrifice my well-being, my reputation, and my future than admit that Marcus was capable of evil. They had made their choice, and it would never be me. That night in the hospital marked the beginning of my escape plan. Over the next 6 months, I worked every angle I could think of to prepare for my 18th birthday. I got a part-time job at a local diner, telling my parents the money was for college expenses, but actually hiding every dollar I earned in a secret account. I researched scholarships and student loans, applied to colleges far away from Colorado, and began reaching out to my father's sister, Patricia, who lived in Oregon. Aunt Patricia was the only extended family member who had ever shown any genuine concern for my well-being. During family gatherings, she was the only adult who actually asked me questions about my life and seemed to listen to my answers. She had always seemed suspicious about the family dynamic, though she never directly confronted my parents about it. When I reached out to her through social media, explaining that I was looking for advice about college and my future, she was immediately supportive and encouraging. During those months of preparation, I became a master at hiding my true feelings and intentions. I stopped reacting to Marcus's abuse, stopped trying to defend myself, and stopped asking my parents for help or support. My family interpreted this change as maturity, thinking I had finally accepted my place in the family hierarchy. In reality, I was just biding my time until I could escape forever. The day finally came. My 18th birthday arrived on a crisp October morning, and my parents announced they were taking the family out to dinner at a nice restaurant to celebrate. Marcus had driven down from Harvard again this time, bringing a collection of gag gifts that I knew would be designed to humiliate me in public. But I had made my decision, and nothing he could do would hurt me anymore, because this would be the last time I ever had to endure his cruelty. During dinner, after the waiters brought out a cake and sang happy birthday while other restaurant patrons watched, I stood up and made an announcement that changed everything. "I am moving out tomorrow," I said clearly and calmly. "I am 18 now, and I am leaving this house permanently." The reaction was immediate and explosive. My mother dropped her fork with a clatter that seemed to echo through the restaurant. "You are being ridiculous," she hissed under her breath, clearly embarrassed that other diners might overhear our family drama. "You cannot survive on your own. You have no idea how hard the real world is." My father's face turned red with anger. "We have given you everything," he said through gritted teeth. "We have provided for you, supported you, loved you unconditionally. How can you be so ungrateful?" The irony of his words was not lost on me. They had provided material things, but love and support had never been part of what they gave me. Marcus, sensing that his favorite victim was about to escape his reach, put on his most convincing performance yet. With tears welling up in his eyes, he reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "Faith, you know I love you. You are my little sister. Why would you want to leave your family?" The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that I could see other restaurant patrons looking at our table with sympathy for the poor older brother whose ungrateful sister was breaking his heart. But I was done being manipulated, done being silenced, and done protecting their feelings at the expense of my own survival. For the first time in my entire life, I looked my abuser directly in the eyes and spoke the truth. Because you have tortured me for 10 years, and they have watched it happen. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus continued his act, his face transforming into an expression of shocked hurt and betrayal. I cannot believe my own sister would make up such horrible lies about me, he said, his voice breaking with fake emotion. How can you say something so awful? My parents' response was exactly what I expected, but still devastating to hear. Those are very serious accusations you are making, my mother said coldly. Do you have any idea what kind of damage statements like that could do to Marcus's future career? My father nodded in agreement. He is about to graduate from Harvard. He has job interviews lined up at prestigious firms. You could ruin everything he has worked for with lies like this. Looking around that table, seeing their faces united against me one final time, I felt something like peace settle over me. You all deserve each other, I said simply. Then I walked out of that restaurant and never looked back. The next morning, I loaded everything I owned into 2 suitcases and my beat-up car, along with the $2,000 I had managed to save from my job. I left a note explaining where I was going and drove straight to Oregon to start my new life. Not one member of my family tried to stop me, called to check on me, or even seemed to care that I was gone. 5 years have passed since that October night when I walked out of my family's life forever. Now I am 23 years old, sitting in my cozy 1-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon, and the woman who answered that phone call is completely different from the broken 18-year-old who left Colorado with nothing but hope for a better life. The journey to healing was not easy or quick. The first year was especially difficult as I struggled with panic attacks, nightmares that left me screaming in the middle of the night, and a depression so deep that some days I could barely get out of bed. I was working 2 part-time jobs to pay for community college and living in a tiny studio apartment that was barely bigger than the closet Marcus used to lock me in, but I was free. For the first time in my life, I went to sleep without fear and woke up without dreading what the day might bring. Nobody was going to hurt me anymore because I had removed myself from the situation entirely. That realization alone was worth every struggle I faced during those early months of independence. The real breakthrough came when I found Dr. Williams, a therapist who specialized in family trauma and childhood abuse. She was the first adult who truly listened to my story without judgment, who validated my experiences, and who helped me understand that what I had endured was not normal sibling rivalry, but systematic abuse. Through months of therapy sessions, I learned how to set healthy boundaries, how to recognize manipulative behavior patterns, and most importantly, how to forgive myself for not fighting back harder. Dr. Williams helped me understand that survival sometimes looks like submission, and that my response to years of abuse had been completely normal and rational. She taught me that I was not weak for not standing up to Marcus sooner, but rather incredibly strong for surviving it all, and even stronger for having the courage to leave when I turned 18. As my mental health improved, other aspects of my life began to fall into place as well. I transferred to Portland State University and earned my degree in social work, driven by a desire to help other children who were experiencing what I had lived through. I started volunteering at a local nonprofit organization that provided support services to abuse victims, and eventually they offered me a full-time position. My personal life flourished too. I met Jake 2 years ago at a community volunteer event, where we were both helping to build a playground for underprivileged kids. Jake is a social worker like me, someone who understands the importance of protecting vulnerable people, and who has never once made me feel like my traumatic past was something to be ashamed of. Our relationship is everything I never knew was possible, built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the kind of safety I had never experienced before. Jake has been incredibly patient with me as I learned how to trust someone completely. He understands why I sometimes flinch when people raise their voices, why I get anxious in small enclosed spaces, and why I have zero tolerance for any kind of manipulation or mind games. He has never pressured me to reconcile with my family or made me feel guilty for cutting them out of my life completely. So when my phone rang that Friday evening with a Colorado area code, I almost did not answer it. Jake and I were cooking dinner together, laughing about something silly that had happened at work when the familiar number appeared on my screen. My stomach dropped because I knew exactly who it was, and I knew they would only be calling if something major had happened. Unknown number. I told Jake, showing him the screen. He looked at the area code and immediately understood the significance. "You do not have to answer it," he said gently, but we both knew I needed to find out what was going on. After 5 years of complete silence, this call had to be important. I answered on the 4th ring, my voice carefully neutral. "Hello." The voice that responded was my mother's, but she sounded older, more tired, and completely defeated. "Faith, honey, we need your help." The casual use of honey after 5 years of no contact would have been laughable if it were not so pathetic. "I am sorry to hear that," I replied, keeping my tone polite but distant. "But why are you calling me now?" There was a long pause before she answered, and I could hear her struggling to find the right words. "Your father had a stroke last month. He is in the hospital." Despite everything they had put me through, I felt a pang of sympathy for anyone dealing with a serious health crisis. "I am sorry to hear that," I said honestly. But why are you calling me now? Where was family when I needed it for 18 years? The question clearly caught her off guard because she started crying. "You are still our daughter," she said through tears. "Family is family." The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. "Where was that philosophy when I was being tortured in your house every single day?" I asked. But then she said something that made my heart stop completely. "Marcus is in jail, Faith." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" I managed to say. "He was arrested." She continued, her voice barely a whisper now. "For assault, against his girlfriend. She pressed charges." For a moment I could not speak. After all these years, someone had finally believed a victim. Someone had finally held Marcus accountable for his actions. "So someone finally believed a victim," I said aloud, and I could hear my mother flinch at the implication. The truth came pouring out then like a dam had burst. Marcus's girlfriend Sarah had filed a detailed police report alleging months of escalating physical and psychological abuse. When the news broke and Marcus was arrested, multiple ex-girlfriends from college and his early career had come forward with their own stories of abuse. The police investigation had uncovered a clear pattern of violence that dated back to his college years. Everything Marcus had worked for was crumbling. He had lost his high-paying job at a prestigious consulting firm. His Harvard alumni network had distanced themselves from him. He was facing serious criminal charges that could result in years in prison. The golden child had finally been exposed for what he really was. "Maybe we were wrong about Marcus," my mother admitted for the first time ever. She told me that my father from his hospital bed had finally acknowledged that maybe they had not protected me the way they should have. But their newfound clarity came with a desperate plea. "We need you, Faith. We do not have anyone else." The irony was staggering. The family that had cast me aside as worthless now needed me because their precious son had turned out to be exactly what I had tried to tell them he was for years. "You had someone else," I told her calmly. "You chose him over me every single time." But despite everything they had put me through, I made the decision to drive back to Colorado one time to visit my father in the hospital. Not because I owed them anything, but because I needed closure for myself. Jake was completely supportive of my decision. "You are strong enough to face this now," he said as I packed a small bag for the trip, "and I will be right here when you get back." Having that support, that unconditional love from someone who actually cared about my well-being, gave me the strength to return to the place where I had experienced so much pain. The drive back to Colorado felt surreal. I had not seen those mountains, those familiar landmarks, in 5 years. When I walked into the hospital room where my father was recovering, I was shocked by how much he had aged. He looked frail and older than his 62 years, a far cry from the imposing figure who had dismissed my cries for help when I was a child. For the first time in my entire life, my father apologized to me. "I failed you as a father," he said, his voice weak and shaky. "I was so focused on Marcus's achievements that I ignored your pain. I am so sorry, Faith." My mother, who was sitting beside his bed, looked like she had aged 10 years in the past month. "We were so wrong," she said through tears. "We should have listened to you. We should have protected you." But their apologies, while perhaps sincere, could not erase 18 years of choosing Marcus over me every single time. "Your apologies do not erase 18 years of choosing him over me," I told them honestly. "I needed you then, not now." I was not angry anymore, just sad for all the years we had lost and all the pain that could have been prevented if they had just chosen to believe me once. Before leaving Colorado, I made one more stop that I needed for my own peace of mind. I visited Marcus in jail. The man who had terrorized me for most of my childhood was sitting across from me in an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller and more pathetic than I remembered. He tried one more time to manipulate me, his voice taking on that familiar pleading tone that used to make our parents feel sorry for him. "I never meant to hurt you, Faith," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I was just a kid, too. I did not know any better." But I was no longer the frightened little girl who believed his lies and manipulation. "You meant every bit of it," I told him calmly. "You enjoyed making me suffer, and now you will face consequences for once in your life." When he realized that his manipulation was not working, Marcus finally showed me his true face one more time. "I need my family's support," he said angrily. "You should be helping me, not abandoning me." I looked at this man who had made my childhood a living nightmare and felt nothing but pity for him. "You should have thought about that before you became a monster," I said. Then I walked out of that jail and finally felt the last chains of my childhood fall away. Driving back to Portland, back to my real life and the people who actually love me, I felt lighter than I had in years. I was no longer carrying the weight of their expectations, their dysfunction, or their guilt. Marcus would face trial for his crimes. My parents would have to live with the knowledge that they had enabled an abuser and failed their daughter. But none of that was my responsibility anymore. I have continued my work helping abuse victims find their voices and escape dangerous situations. There is something deeply healing about turning my own trauma into a source of strength for other people who are still trapped in the nightmare I managed to escape. Every person I help reminds me that my suffering was not meaningless, that something good can come from even the darkest experiences. The relationship with my parents remains distant and probably always will. They send occasional emails now updating me on my father's recovery and asking about my life, but the easy closeness that should exist between parents and their child is gone forever. Too much damage was done. Too many opportunities for protection and love were missed. I have learned that some relationships cannot be repaired, only mourned for what they could have been. Marcus eventually faced trial and was convicted of multiple counts of domestic violence. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison, which felt like justice finally being served. I did not attend the trial, but I heard through my mother that he showed no real remorse, continuing to blame his victims and circumstances for his actions right up until the end. As I reflect on my journey now at 23, I realize that the scared 18-year-old who left Colorado with 2 suitcases and a desperate hope for something better achieved everything she dreamed of and more. I have a career that gives me purpose, relationships built on genuine love and respect, and most importantly, I have peace. I sleep through the night without nightmares. I can be in small spaces without panic. I can trust people to treat me with kindness because I have learned to surround myself only with people who deserve my presence. The most important lesson I have learned is that sometimes protecting yourself means disappointing the people who should have protected you. Blood does not automatically make family. Love, respect, and protection make family. I do not owe loyalty to people who never showed me any, even if we share DNA. To anyone who is living in a situation like I escaped from, I want you to know that healing is possible, that you deserve love and safety, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who will never change. Your worth is not determined by people who cannot see it, even if those people are supposed to be your family. Today, as I sit in my apartment watching the sunset over Portland with Jake beside me, I am grateful for every difficult step that led me here. I am proof that you can break cycles of abuse, that you can build a life filled with love and purpose, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for toxic people is to remove yourself from their ability to hurt you. If I could go back and tell my 8-year-old self anything, it would be this: you are worthy of love. You deserve to be protected, and someday you will find people who see your value and treat you accordingly. Hold on until you can save yourself, because that day will come. Have you ever had to choose between your family and your own well-being? What would you have done in my situation? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming adversity. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone in their struggles. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and remember that no matter what you are going through right now, you have the strength to create the life you deserve. Take care of yourselves out there, and I will see you in the next video.